Picture this. You wake up Tuesday morning, step outside with your coffee, and hear the rumble of concrete trucks disappearing from the old stone bridge. The only bridge connecting your property to the outside world, now blocked by massive concrete barriers. That's what Marcus Kellerman found when his corrupt HOA decided his 60-year-old family farm was ruining their $15 million luxury neighborhood. The smell of wet concrete hung in the morning air. His diabetic mother couldn't cross to reach dialysis. His teenage daughter was trapped, missing school. Emergency vehicles? Cut off completely. The HOA claimed emergency bridge repairs, but Marcus soon discovered their real plan. Cut his lifeline until he'd sell his $3.2 million property dirt cheap, clearing the final obstacle to their exclusive development. Well, they picked the wrong farmer. Marcus had cameras rolling, 2 years of evidence, and a legal nuclear weapon that would land the HOA queen in federal prison. What would you do if they literally cut your bridge to force you out? Where are you watching from? I bet half of you have HOA nightmare stories. Marcus Kellerman never thought he'd be fighting for his life at 52. Third-generation owner of Kellerman Farm, he'd inherited 15 acres of the most beautiful land you've ever seen, rolling hills covered in heritage apple trees his grandfather planted in the 1960s, when this area was nothing but farmland and country roads. Back then, his grandfather Daniel had helped fund the construction of Millbrook Bridge, a charming stone structure that connected their hilltop farm to the main county road. The smell of apple blossoms in spring, the crunch of gravel under work boots, the distant lowing of cattle from neighboring farms. This was rural America at its finest. His family lived in the original 1890s farmhouse, weathered clapboard siding that had sheltered 5 generations. Wife Sarah worked as a school nurse, 16-year-old daughter Emma played varsity soccer, and 78-year-old mother Dorothy lived with them, requiring life-saving dialysis 3 times a week. A normal American family on land they'd called home for 60 years. But times change, and not always for the better. 10 years ago, luxury developer Prestige Valley Estates bought the surrounding 200 acres and built 47 McMansions worth $800,000 to $1.5 million each. Overnight, Marcus found himself surrounded by people who considered his organic vegetable operation an eyesore and his heritage farm incompatible with luxury living. The new residents formed the Millbrook Lane Homeowners Association, claiming authority over the shared private road, including the historic bridge Marcus's family had helped fund. The original 1962 easement documents were frustratingly vague about maintenance responsibilities, creating a legal gray area that would soon become a weapon. Then came Vivian Ashworth, your worst HOA nightmare made flesh. Picture a 61-year-old retired pharmaceutical executive with a perfectly styled blonde bob, always dressed in designer tennis whites, driving a white Tesla Model X like she owned the world. She'd moved from Connecticut 2 years earlier with an attitude that screamed, "I'm better than you small-town people." Vivian immediately ran for HOA president, unopposed, after she somehow convinced the other candidates to withdraw. Her first official act? Complaining about the agricultural odors from Marcus's composting operation. You know, the smell of healthy soil that feeds the organic vegetables she probably bought at Whole Foods for triple the price. The harassment started subtly. Certified letters about property value concerns. Anonymous complaints about farm equipment noise at 7 a.m. Apparently, tractors disturbed the tennis schedule. Suggestions that Marcus might be happier somewhere more agricultural. Each interaction grew more aggressive. Vivian would park her Tesla at the bridge entrance, timing Marcus's daily routines like a stalker. She'd take photos of his delivery trucks, measuring tire widths and documenting every perceived violation of some imaginary community standard. The legal intimidation escalated when Vivian hired Blackstone and Associates, a law firm notorious for aggressive HOA enforcement. They demanded Marcus provide proof of legal road access rights within 30 days or face access termination procedures. Marcus tried reasoning with her, offering to pay his proportional share of legitimate maintenance costs. Vivian's response? A condescending smirk and the words, "Oh, Marcus, this isn't about money. This is about what's best for the community." The way she emphasized community made it crystal clear his family wasn't included in her vision. That's when Marcus started recording conversations. During one heated phone call, he overheard Vivian discussing market assessment showing 15 million total development potential with someone named Brad. Terms like Phase 1 complete and final obstacle removal kept surfacing. The night before they cut his bridge, Vivian held an emergency HOA meeting. Marcus wasn't notified naturally. The next morning, massive concrete barriers and road closed, authorized vehicles only signs greeted him like prison walls. The acrid smell of fresh cement hung in the air as diesel fumes from departing construction trucks drifted across his apple orchard, his family's lifeline to the outside world, severed with surgical precision. Dorothy missed her dialysis appointment. Emma got detention for tardiness. And Marcus realized this was war. The bridge blockade was just the opening shot. Within 48 hours, Marcus received a 14-page legal document from Blackstone and Associates that made his blood boil. The letterhead alone probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and the message was crystal clear: surrender or face total destruction. Vivian's lawyers claimed Marcus had exceeded agricultural use limitations and damaged community infrastructure through excessive commercial vehicle traffic. The evidence? Photos of tire ruts allegedly from Marcus's tractor, except Marcus immediately recognized those tracks. They came from the HOA's own construction vehicles used to install the bridge barriers just days earlier. The legal deadline was brutal: 21 days to remedy all violations or face permanent access termination. Translation: sell your family farm or become a prisoner on your own land forever. But Marcus wasn't backing down. That weekend, while Sarah kept the farm running and Emma helped with weekend chores, he spent 2 full days at the county records office. The musty smell of old paper and fluorescent lighting reminded him of his high school library, but these dusty file cabinets held the key to his family's survival. What he found made him smile for the first time in weeks. The original 1962 easement deed stated in plain English that the Kellerman family had perpetual vehicular access rights for agricultural and residential purposes. Marcus remembered reading somewhere that continuous road usage for 20-plus years creates legal rights that HOAs typically can't revoke, and his family had been using this road for 60 years. Even better, the document specified that road maintenance costs should be shared proportional to usage. As Marcus dug deeper, he discovered the HOA had been systematically overcharging commercial trucking companies for access fees, pocketing the excess revenue. Marcus hired Janet Reeves, a tough-as-nails local attorney who'd spent 30 years fighting property rights cases and had never lost to an HOA. Janet took one look at the evidence and immediately filed a quiet title action to clarify road rights, plus demanded a complete audit of the HOA's suspicious $180,000 annual road maintenance budget. That's when Marcus stumbled onto something that changed everything. Following the money trail through construction invoices, he discovered the HOA had been billing the exact same road repairs to 2 different accounts, charging both member dues and Prestige Valley Estates' construction budget. $45,000 charged twice for emergency infrastructure improvements. Pure fraud, documented in black and white. Vivian's response was swift and vicious. She hosted an emergency community meeting at her mansion, naturally excluding Marcus, to discuss external threats to property values. The woman actually served Pinot Grigio and imported cheese while plotting to destroy a family that had lived there since before she was born. Within days, anonymous flyers appeared in every mailbox, claiming Marcus's organic fertilizers posed health hazards to children and pets. The flyers featured photos of his compost bins taken with telephoto lenses, making natural decomposition look like toxic waste dumps. The paper smelled like expensive perfume, Vivian's signature scent that everyone in the neighborhood recognized. The psychological warfare escalated when the HOA installed security cameras pointed directly at Marcus's gate, along with bright LED floodlights that turned his peaceful farm into a prison yard. The constant electrical hum replaced the natural sounds of crickets and owls that had lulled his family to sleep for generations. Emma started wearing earplugs to bed, but Marcus was playing chess while Vivian played checkers. Trail cameras captured HOA board members skulking around his property at midnight. His weekly farm stand became an intelligence-gathering operation, as neighbors quietly shared information about Vivian's increasingly desperate tactics. The breakthrough came when Mrs. Mila, a retired teacher and longtime HOA member, approached Marcus during vegetable sales. "She tried recruiting me to complain about property tax implications," Mrs. Mila whispered, nervously glancing around. "Marcus, I think you should know. She's planning something much bigger than road access." That bigger plan revealed itself the next morning. Marcus discovered his car tires slashed in the school parking lot while attending Emma's parent-teacher conference. The rubber hung in shreds, and the distinct smell of fresh-cut tire rubber filled his nostrils. Security footage showed a white Tesla in the vicinity just minutes before the vandalism was discovered. The message was unmistakable. We can reach your family anywhere, anytime. Marcus realized this wasn't just about property rights anymore. This was about whether a corrupt HOA board could terrorize an American family into abandoning everything their ancestors had built. He started sleeping with a baseball bat beside his bed, and Sarah began varying her routes to work, constantly checking mirrors for Tesla headlights. The sound of gravel crunching under tires now made everyone in the Kellerman household freeze and listen. Was it a legitimate delivery truck, or another late-night harassment campaign? The smell of diesel fuel, once associated with honest farm work, now triggered anxiety about what fresh hell Vivian might unleash next. But Marcus had one crucial advantage Vivian didn't know about. He'd been recording every threatening phone conversation, documenting every harassment incident with timestamps and photos, and building a legal case that would soon turn her privileged world completely upside down. Vivian wasn't done playing dirty. 3 days after the tire-slashing incident, Marcus received a surprise visit from the county code enforcement officer, followed by fire inspectors, building inspectors, and environmental officials, all carrying clipboards, all asking questions about his illegal commercial activity. Turns out Vivian had weaponized the entire bureaucratic system against him. She'd filed coordinated complaints with every county department on the same day, a calculated assault designed to overwhelm Marcus with inspection fees, compliance costs, and administrative hell. The paper trail was unmistakable, all complaints submitted within a 2-hour window, all using identical language about public safety concerns. The county demanded Marcus obtain a commercial agricultural permit for farming operations that had been running legally since 1960. The permit application alone cost $2,800, plus a mandatory environmental impact study for $15,000. Timeline for compliance? 45 days or face daily fines of $500. But Sarah had been doing her own detective work. Her nursing background made her naturally suspicious of coincidences, so she'd been digging through social media profiles and public records. What she found made Marcus's blood pressure spike. Vivian's LinkedIn showed direct connections to 3 county officials who'd suddenly become interested in the Kellerman farm. The smoking gun? Vivian's Facebook photos from a girls' weekend in Napa Valley, featuring wine selfies with the county commissioner's wife. Restaurant receipts from Sarah's research showed Vivian had dined with the lead code inspector 2 days before the farm harassment began. Marcus had read enough news stories about corruption to recognize the pattern, officials accepting meals and entertainment in exchange for selective enforcement. Janet Reeves immediately filed a selective enforcement complaint, pointing out that 47 other rural properties in the county had identical violations that were never cited. She demanded all communications between HOA board members and county officials regarding the Kellerman farm through public records requests. The documents that came back were devastating. Email chains revealed Vivian had been cultivating these relationships for months, hosting dinner parties and charity events specifically to influence county policy. One particularly damning email discussed making Marcus so miserable with inspections that he'll take any offer just to escape. During this bureaucratic bombardment, Mrs. Mila made another secret visit to Marcus's farm stand. This time, she brought something that would change everything, a smartphone recording from Vivian's latest strategy session with 3 board members. Mrs. Mila had hidden her phone under a decorative pillow during what she thought was a normal HOA meeting. The audio quality was crystal clear, Vivian's voice discussing Phase 2 pressure tactics and instructing board members to document every code violation, real or imagined. But the most chilling part was her casual mention of forcing Marcus to sell at 40% below market value, then we flip it to Brad for the full $3.2 million. Marcus recognized that name. Brad was the developer contact he'd overheard in previous phone conversations. The conspiracy was bigger than he'd imagined, involving not just harassment, but systematic market manipulation to steal his property at fire sale prices. Vivian's next move targeted something even more personal: water rights. She convinced the HOA to vote on emergency water conservation measures during fabricated drought concerns. Suddenly, Marcus's irrigation system violated community standards, and the main water line to his property developed mysterious maintenance issues requiring weeks of repairs. The timing was surgical. Without irrigation, Marcus's organic vegetables would die just as summer growing season peaked. His farm-to-table delivery contracts with 3 major restaurants were already hanging by a thread due to access problems. Losing his crops would finish him financially. But Marcus had learned to think 3 moves ahead. Instead of begging the HOA for water access, he quietly hired a well drilling company and punched a new water source directly on his property. Perfectly legal, completely independent of HOA control, and absolutely infuriating to Vivian when she discovered the drilling equipment on his land. The sound of the drill bit grinding through bedrock at 6 a.m. probably woke half the neighborhood. Marcus smiled every morning listening to that mechanical rhythm, knowing each foot deeper meant one step closer to independence from Vivian's stranglehold. Meanwhile, community battle lines were hardening. Vivian's supporters began parking cars to block Marcus's farm stand customers, forcing families to walk hundreds of yards just to buy fresh vegetables. Emma reported being excluded from study groups and uninvited from parties, teenage social warfare reflecting the adult conflict. The breaking point came when someone sprayed industrial herbicide along Marcus's property line during the night, killing his prize heritage apple trees, 130-year-old varieties his great-grandfather had planted. The chemical smell lingered for days, acrid and artificial in the morning air that once carried only the sweet scent of apple blossoms. Those trees weren't just plants, they were living family history. Marcus stood among the withered branches, touching bark his ancestors had touched, watching Emma cry over trees she'd climbed as a little girl. Dorothy sat in her wheelchair, staring at the destruction with tears in her eyes, remembering her husband planting saplings 60 years ago. That night, Sarah found Marcus sitting alone in the kitchen at 2 a.m., staring at photos of the trees in full bloom. "They're trying to erase us," he whispered, "not just force us out, erase every trace we were ever here." The tree poisoning was Vivian's biggest mistake yet. Within hours, photos of the dead heritage apple trees went viral on local Facebook groups, generating hundreds of angry comments from people who'd never even heard of the Kellerman farm before. The acrid smell of dying wood seemed to carry for miles, a chemical stench that made neighbors realize this wasn't just property dispute. This was environmental warfare. But Vivian doubled down on destruction. She contacted Marcus's 3 remaining restaurant clients, claiming food safety concerns about produce grown on a farm with compromised access roads. Her voice dripped with false concern during recorded calls where she described imaginary contamination risks. The restaurants, already nervous about liability, canceled contracts within the same week. Monthly farm income dropped 70% overnight. For the first time in Marcus's life, mortgage payments were at risk. Sarah found him at the kitchen table at midnight, calculator in hand, trying to figure out how long they could survive without selling. The numbers were brutal. The insurance attack came next, coordinated with surgical precision. Marcus's farm policy was suddenly under review for high-risk location factors, with cancellation notices arriving the exact same day. County fire inspectors demanded $25,000 in emergency access improvements. That's when Sarah made a discovery that changed everything. Digging through corporate filings, she found that Vivian sat on the board of directors for Regional Risk Assessment Corporation, Marcus's insurance parent company. Her vote had directly influenced his policy review. The meeting minutes showed discussions about problematic rural policies in development zones. Marcus had read enough investigative journalism to recognize the pattern. Corruption often hides in corporate board relationships and regulatory capture. Once you know where to look, the financial conflicts become obvious and prosecutable under federal anti-corruption statutes. The midnight dumping operation was captured in full HD by Marcus's security cameras. Dump trucks with Prestige Valley logos illegally scattered construction debris across his organic fields, broken concrete, rusty rebar, chemical-stained lumber destroying soil that had been certified organic for 15 years. The grinding sound of hydraulic lifts and the crash of falling debris echoed across the valley like mechanical thunder. By dawn, Vivian had filed emergency environmental complaints claiming Marcus operated hazardous agricultural practices. She contacted competing newspapers with fabricated stories about contamination cover-ups by a rogue farmer threatening neighborhood safety. But Mrs. Mila's surveillance network had documented everything. Time-stamped photos proved the debris came from Prestige Valley's construction site. Environmental testing confirmed identical chemical signatures. Marcus was the victim, not the perpetrator. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit had been quietly building cases based on Marcus's evidence packages. Bank records revealed $400,000 in wire transfers from Prestige Valley accounts to Vivian's consulting company over 18 months. Each payment corresponded precisely with harassment campaigns against the Kellerman family. Jake Henderson finally came forward with the smoking gun. Video footage of Vivian's private strategy meeting where she admitted fabricating evidence and distributed $10,000 cash to board members. The audio was crystal clear, the conspiracy undeniable, and the federal charges inevitable. Vivian's privileged world began crumbling. Her tennis club suspended membership pending investigation. Former pharmaceutical colleagues filed ethics complaints with state licensing boards. Legal bills exceeded $80,000 as law firms charged premium rates for a hopeless case. The retaliation against Marcus's allies was swift and petty. Jake's car was vandalized with tire slashing and keyed paint. Tom Patel lost clients after providing forensic accounting support. Mrs. Mila faced social ostracism from book clubs and garden societies. Teenage-level bullying from supposed adults. But the psychological toll on Marcus's family was reaching critical mass. Dorothy's blood pressure spiked during dialysis sessions, triggering cardiac warnings from doctors. Emma's grades dropped as social isolation affected her concentration. The constant stress was literally killing his family. Sarah started researching houses in other states during sleepless nights, quietly preparing escape plans if Vivian's terrorism succeeded. The smell of diesel fuel now triggered panic attacks instead of nostalgic memories of farm life. Every car engine sound after dark made the family freeze and listen. Marcus found her crying in the laundry room one evening, holding Emma's soccer uniform and whispering, "What if we have to leave? What if she wins?" That's when Marcus realized this wasn't just about property rights anymore. This was about whether an American family could be terrorized into abandoning everything their ancestors built. That night, he made a decision that would change everything. No more defensive moves. Time to go on offense. The federal investigation expanded daily. IRS Criminal Division opened tax evasion cases. Bank fraud investigators found money laundering evidence. Wire fraud charges triggered federal jurisdiction when payments crossed state lines. Vivian's final desperate gambit was attempting to have Marcus arrested on fabricated terroristic threat charges, timing the false police report for 24 hours before his planned public evidence presentation. But Marcus's legal team was 3 steps ahead, with phone records, witness statements, and audio proof ready to destroy her last lie. The town hall meeting would be Vivian's final public appearance as a free woman. The breakthrough came on a rain-soaked Thursday morning when Janet Reeves called Marcus with news that would change everything. Her paralegal, digging through dusty county archives for the original easement documents, had discovered a forgotten clause buried in the 1962 road construction contract that nobody had noticed for 60 years. The provision was written in dense legal language, but the meaning hit Marcus like lightning. If road maintenance costs ever exceeded 300% of original estimates, maintenance responsibility would automatically transfer back to county government. Janet's voice crackled with excitement over the phone as she read the exact wording twice. Marcus grabbed his calculator with trembling hands. The original 1962 maintenance estimate was $21,000 adjusted for inflation. Vivian's HOA was spending $180,000 annually, 847% above the legal threshold. They'd been operating outside their authority for years, but Tom Patel's forensic accounting had uncovered something even more devastating. The HOA's preferred contractor, Valley Infrastructure, was actually a subsidiary of Prestige Valley Estates. Road maintenance bills were inflated 400% above market rates, with excess funds funneled directly back to the development company through fake invoicing schemes. Sarah spread bank records across their kitchen table, and the smell of fresh coffee couldn't mask the stench of systematic corruption. Highlighted transactions showed a money laundering operation disguised as legitimate business expenses. Every pothole repair was theft. Every line painting job was fraud. Every emergency improvement was organized crime. The county attorney's panicked response revealed how deep the legal trouble ran. If road maintenance reverted to government control, the county would become liable for blocking Marcus's constitutional access rights. Worse, denying access to a family with a disabled member could trigger federal civil rights violations with massive financial penalties. Marcus remembered reading about similar disability discrimination cases that resulted in million-dollar federal settlements. The county's insurance company was already threatening coverage cancellation, creating political pressure that reached the governor's office. Vivian's personal financial records, obtained through federal subpoenas, exposed $200,000 in unreported consulting income from Prestige Valley Estates. The IRS Criminal Division was building tax evasion cases, while state boards moved to revoke her pharmaceutical licenses for ethics violations. The bigger picture emerged like pieces of a criminal puzzle. Prestige Valley Estates was facing foreclosure on construction loans if Phase 2 didn't break ground by December. Bank executives had been pressuring developers to resolve access issues using any means necessary, explaining the increasingly desperate harassment timeline: $8 million in potential losses if the project delayed beyond Q4. Every month Marcus held out was another month closer to financial ruin for everyone involved in the conspiracy. No wonder Vivian's tactics had become criminally reckless, but Marcus held the nuclear option that would destroy them all. The original environmental impact study for Prestige Valley Estates had excluded his 15 acres from assessment, assuming voluntary cooperation. Federal environmental law required complete review if development expanded beyond original scope. Adding Marcus's property would trigger an 18-month federal environmental review, killing the construction timeline and bankrupting the entire operation. His heritage apple orchard provided habitat for protected bird species, and his organic farming practices had created ecosystems that would require extensive federal study. Environmental lawyers were already circling, sensing blood in the water. The Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, and National Environmental Policy Act all provided multiple avenues for intervention. Each study would cost Prestige Valley over $2 million, with no guarantee of approval. The revelation's impact on Marcus's family was transformative. Sarah's confidence returned as victory became probable instead of possible. Emma proudly shared updates with classmates, no longer ashamed but inspired by her family's courage. Dorothy's stress-related health symptoms began improving for the first time in months. But Marcus felt something unexpected as he absorbed the magnitude of his legal weapons, a heavy responsibility. He could destroy Vivian completely, bankrupt the development company, and trigger federal investigations that would reshape county government. The power was intoxicating and terrifying. That evening he stood among his poisoned heritage apple trees, breathing air that still carried faint chemical traces of Vivian's environmental terrorism. The dead branches creaked in the wind like accusatory fingers, reminding him what she'd tried to steal from his family. 6 HOA board members had already demanded Vivian's resignation. Her lawyers withdrew representation, citing criminal liability. Personal insurance companies canceled her coverage. Federal prosecutors were building cases that could send her to prison for decades. Marcus realized he wasn't just fighting for his farm anymore. This had become a test case for rural property rights across America, a symbol of family heritage versus corporate greed, individual liberty versus HOA tyranny. Millions of people were watching, and his victory could protect countless other families facing similar attacks. The war was about to end. But first, Marcus had to decide just how completely he wanted to destroy his enemies, and whether total victory was worth the man he might become in achieving it. Marcus's kitchen table became ground zero for the most important battle of his life. The smell of strong coffee mixed with the rustle of legal documents as his war council assembled at midnight. Janet Reeves with her weathered briefcase, Tom Patel spreading forensic evidence across every surface, Sarah coordinating media contacts on her laptop, and Mrs. Mila nervously glancing toward the window as she shared insider intelligence. The strategy was surgical, a coordinated 72-hour blitzkrieg designed to overwhelm Vivian's defenses before she could mount desperate counterattacks. Janet spread county maps across the table, red ink marking political pressure points and legal vulnerabilities like a general planning D-Day. 4 simultaneous fronts, Janet explained, her finger tracing battle lines: county liability, federal civil rights, criminal conspiracy, and environmental destruction. By the time they realize what's happening, federal agents will be reading Miranda rights. The legal arsenal was devastating. Emergency motion demanding immediate road reopening under the forgotten 1962 clause. Federal civil rights complaint citing disability discrimination. Dorothy's medical access created constitutional violations that could trigger million-dollar damages. Criminal referral documenting systematic corruption. Environmental review that would bankrupt the entire development. Marcus had learned a hard truth during these months of harassment. Fighting corruption requires understanding how power actually flows, not how civics textbooks pretend it works. Local political relationships, regulatory capture, and financial influence create shadow governments that override formal legal processes. But federal investigations cut through that corruption like wildfire through dry grass. Tom's financial analysis laid out the stunning fraud scope. $400,000 in fake HOA charges, $200,000 in bribes to Vivian, systematic money laundering through contractor schemes. The paper trail led directly to Prestige Valley's boardroom and potentially to RICO prosecutions that could destroy entire corporate hierarchies. Emma wandered into the kitchen for a midnight snack, staring wide-eyed at the evidence covering every surface. "Dad, are we really going to win?" she whispered. Marcus pulled her into a hug that smelled like apple shampoo and teenage hope. "We're going to do more than win, sweetheart. We're going to make sure this never happens to another family. The media coordination was equally crucial. Sarah had cultivated relationships with investigative reporters specializing in rural property rights and government corruption. The story needed national attention, creating political pressure that would force quick resolution and prevent quiet cover-ups. Mrs. Mila's intelligence network had expanded to 6 HOA members secretly recording Vivian's increasingly unhinged behavior. Audio files captured her screaming at contractors, threatening board members who questioned expenses, and making racist comments about those people who didn't belong in luxury neighborhoods. The environmental nuclear option required precise timing. Federal reviews typically took 18 months, but triggering the process would immediately freeze all construction loans and halt development activity. Environmental lawyers were standing by with preliminary injunctions that could be filed within hours of Marcus's signal. Dorothy wheeled herself into the kitchen, her dialysis equipment humming softly as she surveyed the battle preparations. "Your grandfather would be proud," she told Marcus, her voice shaky with emotion. "He built that bridge with his own hands to help neighbors. He'd want you to protect it." Political pressure was building at every level. State Agricultural Commissioner announced formal investigations. County commissioners facing re-election were distancing themselves from controversial projects. Federal representatives were preparing statements supporting rural heritage preservation. The town hall presentation required careful choreography. Marcus practiced delivering complex legal concepts in simple language that working families could understand. Visual aids showed money flows, audio clips revealed criminal conversations, financial charts demonstrated systematic theft. Every piece designed for maximum emotional impact on ordinary citizens who'd never seen corruption this close. Community support had exploded beyond expectations. Save Kellerman Farm reached 5,000 members across 3 states. Local businesses were providing services at cost. Regional newspapers were preparing coordinated coverage. Agricultural advocacy groups were sending representatives from as far away as Montana and Georgia. Sarah discovered that Vivian's campaign had violated multiple federal statutes most people never knew existed. Wire fraud for electronic threats, mail fraud for postal harassment, conspiracy to deprive civil rights under Section 1983. Each violation carried prison sentences measured in decades, not months. The coordination timeline was military precise. All legal filings Tuesday at 9 a.m., creating information overload, preventing effective response. Media interviews at 2 p.m., building public pressure before counter-narratives could develop. Town hall climax at 7 p.m., where everything would explode into public view. Behind-the-scenes settlement discussions revealed Vivian's growing desperation. Initial offers of $500,000 for mutual resolution showed how terrified they were of public trials. But Marcus wasn't interested in quiet payoffs that would let corruption continue elsewhere. The night before the assault, Marcus stood on his porch breathing air that still carried traces of poisoned apple trees. Tomorrow would bring either complete victory or devastating defeat. But tonight, listening to Sarah's laughter from inside and Emma practicing soccer kicks in the yard, he knew they'd already won the only thing that truly mattered. His family was still home. And tomorrow, they'd make sure it stayed that way forever. Vivian must have sensed the trap closing around her, because what happened next proved that desperate people make catastrophically stupid decisions. Just 12 hours before Marcus's coordinated legal assault was scheduled to launch, she made moves so reckless they guaranteed her own destruction. The first sign was Mrs. Mila's panicked 2 a.m. phone call. "She's lost her mind," Mrs. Mila whispered. "I just watched her sneak onto your property with some kind of tool. The floodlights are casting shadows, but she's definitely tampering with something near your equipment shed." Marcus's security cameras captured everything in crystal clear HD. Vivian, wearing dark clothing and latex gloves, methodically damaging his irrigation control system with bolt cutters and a small crowbar. Not random vandalism, targeted sabotage designed to destroy his organic certification by contaminating crops with unfiltered water. What Vivian didn't realize was that the irrigation system connected to federal agricultural monitoring networks. Damaging federal compliance equipment was a felony that automatically triggered FBI jurisdiction, regardless of local political relationships. She'd just graduated from civil harassment to federal crimes, but her most devastating mistake came at dawn. Panicked by Marcus's impending legal filings, Vivian called the county sheriff, claiming Marcus had made terroristic threats during a late-night phone conversation. She demanded immediate arrest to prevent his town hall presentation, providing detailed fabricated quotes about burning down the whole neighborhood. The sheriff's deputy was professionally skeptical. Marcus had been coaching Emma's soccer team the previous evening, surrounded by 60 witnesses, including the deputy's own daughter. The supposed threatening call occurred at exactly 8:47 p.m., the same time Marcus was buying victory milkshakes for the entire team at Murphy's Diner. Marcus had learned from watching investigative documentaries that phone records don't lie, and desperate people always forget about digital evidence trails. Sure enough, his phone logs showed no outgoing calls during the alleged threat timeframe, while his credit card receipt provided perfect alibi documentation. The mini-twist emerged when FBI agents discovered Vivian had recruited her landscaper's teenage son, offering him $500 to make anonymous calls claiming Marcus was planning violent retaliation. The kid immediately confessed to his parents, who marched him straight to federal authorities. Witness tampering and conspiracy charges were now inevitable. Meanwhile, Marcus's legal blitzkrieg launched with military precision. Janet filed emergency motions in 3 courts simultaneously, creating a document avalanche that overwhelmed Vivian's legal team. County clerks processed restraining orders, civil rights complaints, and environmental triggers faster than opposing attorneys could respond. The county attorney's reaction was swift and public. Faced with potential federal liability for blocking disabled medical access, he ordered immediate road barrier removal without consulting the HOA. County crews arrived at Millbrook Bridge with sledgehammers and heavy equipment, demolishing Vivian's concrete walls while local news cameras captured every satisfying blow. But Vivian's world was collapsing faster than anyone expected. Her tennis club formally expelled her after learning about federal charges. Former pharmaceutical colleagues filed ethics complaints to protect their own licenses. The country club where she'd hosted corruption dinners banned her indefinitely, afraid of federal scrutiny. Tom Patel's forensic evidence triggered immediate criminal referrals. Bank records documenting systematic money laundering and tax evasion were so damning that state prosecutors filed charges within hours instead of their usual months-long review process. $400,000 in fraud, documented in excruciating detail. The environmental review was Prestige Valley's death blow. Federal investigators confirmed Marcus's organic farm provided critical habitat for endangered bird species that nested exclusively in heritage apple trees. Construction permits were permanently revoked, pending comprehensive impact studies that could take years to complete. Banking executives holding Prestige Valley's construction loans were in full crisis mode. $8 million in development financing was now worthless, with no legal pathway to project completion. Emergency meetings were called, executives were terminated, and bankruptcy attorneys were retained. Emma provided the day's most heartwarming moment, returning from school with news that Vivian's daughter had publicly apologized in the cafeteria, begging forgiveness for her mother's completely insane behavior, and asking if they could remain friends despite the family warfare. The federal investigation kept expanding like ripples in a pond. IRS Criminal Division discovered additional unreported income linking Vivian to development projects across 3 counties. Wire fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy, and potential RICO violations were accumulating like criminal charges in a legal avalanche. Media attention reached national prominence. CNN's rural affairs correspondent arrived to cover the story as a symbol of family farms versus corporate pressure. Agricultural publications called Marcus's case the most significant rural property rights battle in decades. But Marcus sensed Vivian wasn't finished. Cornered criminals don't surrender gracefully. They lash out desperately at everything around them. The acrid smell of damaged electrical equipment still hung in the morning air, mixing with dust from demolished concrete barriers and the sweet scent of restored freedom. Dorothy's dialysis transport rumbled across the newly opened bridge, and the sound was beautiful. Medical access restored, constitutional rights vindicated, family safety secured. But Marcus kept his security systems running and his guard elevated. Wounded predators are most dangerous when cornered, and Vivian still had access to resources, connections, and the kind of desperate fury that makes people attempt the unthinkable. With federal charges closing in and her empire crumbling, Vivian made one final desperate play that would either save her or destroy everyone involved. But this time, she wasn't working alone. She'd found allies in unexpected places. The first sign of escalating danger came when Marcus discovered his farm's organic certification was under emergency review by the state agricultural department. Anonymous complaints alleged contamination events and fraudulent testing procedures that could revoke his certification permanently. Without organic status, his premium contracts would vanish and his property value would plummet. But Sarah's investigative instincts immediately spotted the pattern. The complaint language was identical to previous harassment documents, and the timing coincided perfectly with Vivian's mounting legal troubles. Someone was still pulling strings from behind the scenes, even as federal agents closed in. The mini-twist emerged when Tom Patel's financial analysis revealed the real puppet master. Brad Morrison, the Prestige Valley executive Marcus had heard about in recorded conversations, wasn't just a developer. He was Vivian's former pharmaceutical industry colleague and current romantic partner. Their 20-year relationship explained why she'd been willing to risk everything for his development project. Morrison had been feeding Vivian's strategies, providing legal funding, and coordinating with corrupt officials throughout the entire campaign. Bank records showed he'd personally guaranteed her legal fees and bribe payments, treating Marcus's harassment as a business expense for land acquisition. The conspiracy was deeper and more personal than anyone had realized. But Morrison was also more dangerous than Vivian. As a corporate executive with political connections across 3 states, he had resources and influence that could reach into federal investigations. Marcus remembered reading about corporate criminals who'd successfully intimidated witnesses and manipulated evidence even after indictments were filed. The intimidation campaign against Marcus's allies escalated to professional sabotage. Jake Henderson lost his municipal planning job after Morrison's associates filed complaints about ethics violations and conflict of interest. Mrs. Mila received threatening letters claiming neighborhood surveillance violated privacy laws. Tom Patel's accounting firm was audited by state revenue agents acting on anonymous tips. Marcus realized they were fighting more than local corruption. This was organized crime with corporate funding and political protection. Morrison had spent decades building networks of influence that could pressure prosecutors, intimidate witnesses, and manipulate legal proceedings even at the federal level. The environmental sabotage plot was Morrison's masterstroke. Instead of crude vandalism, he hired a team of chemistry consultants to introduce trace amounts of banned pesticides into Marcus's soil samples. The contamination would be subtle enough to avoid immediate detection, but devastating to organic certification when routine testing occurred. Federal agents intercepted the plot only because Morrison's hired consultants were already under FBI surveillance for similar operations in other states. The Bureau had been tracking a nationwide network of agricultural saboteurs who specialized in destroying organic farms for development companies. The revelation that Marcus's case was part of a multi-state criminal enterprise changed everything. FBI resources expanded dramatically when agents realized they were investigating systematic racketeering rather than isolated local corruption. Wiretaps, surveillance teams, and undercover operations were already tracking Morrison's network across the entire region. But Morrison's most chilling strategy targeted Marcus's family directly. Federal agents discovered plans to kidnap Emma during her soccer practice, holding her until Marcus agreed to sell his property and relocate out of state. The kidnapping would be disguised as teenage runaway situation, providing cover for psychological torture until the family surrendered. The kidnapping conspiracy was interrupted when Morrison's hired muscle turned out to be undercover federal agents who'd infiltrated his criminal network months earlier. His recorded instructions about making the family disappear until they cooperate provided prosecutors with attempted kidnapping and conspiracy charges carrying life sentences. Emma's protection became a federal priority. U.S. Marshals provided security at school and sporting events while the family was relocated to a safe house pending Morrison's arrest. The sterile smell of government facilities replaced the familiar scents of apple blossoms and fresh soil, but safety was more important than comfort. The federal investigation expanded to include Secret Service agents tracking financial crimes, DEA agents investigating drug money laundering, and ATF agents pursuing weapons violations. Morrison's network had tentacles reaching into legitimate businesses, political campaigns, and regulatory agencies across multiple states. Marcus learned that defending property rights sometimes means discovering how deep corruption can penetrate American institutions. Local officials, state agencies, and federal regulators all had individuals compromised by Morrison's influence networks, creating systematic bias against rural landowners who threatened development profits. But the investigation also revealed unexpected allies. Agricultural advocacy groups, environmental organizations, and property rights lawyers had been tracking Morrison's activities for years, waiting for the right case to bring federal prosecution. Marcus's evidence had provided the missing pieces for multiple ongoing investigations. Morrison's arrest was coordinated across 4 states simultaneously, preventing communication with co-conspirators or destruction of evidence. FBI raids on Prestige Valley offices, government agencies, and political headquarters seized millions of documents revealing the full scope of the criminal enterprise. The town hall meeting tomorrow evening would now serve a different purpose. Instead of confronting Vivian alone, Marcus would be presenting evidence of nationwide conspiracy that had victimized hundreds of rural families. Federal prosecutors planned to use the venue for announcing indictments against 37 defendants in 6 states. That night, sitting in the safe house with his family protected by federal agents, Marcus realized they'd stumbled into something much larger than a neighborhood dispute. They'd exposed a criminal network that threatened the foundation of rural property ownership across America. Victory was certain now, but the scope of the corruption they'd uncovered was terrifying. The Riverside Community Center had never seen anything like this. By 6:30 p.m., over 400 people packed every seat, lined the walls, and spilled onto the sidewalk outside where additional speakers broadcast the proceedings to another 200 spectators. The air crackled with anticipation and the nervous energy of a community finally ready for blood. 6 television crews had transformed the venue into a media battlefield. CNN, Fox News, and network correspondents positioned cameras for maximum impact, while local reporters coordinated live streams reaching millions nationwide. The clicking of camera shutters created constant percussion punctuated by the electric hum of microphones waiting to amplify justice. Federal marshals flanked the entrance as a parade of power entered. County Commissioner Williams, State Legislator Rodriguez, EPA Regional Director Thompson, and FBI Special Agent Martinez, who'd been hunting Morrison's criminal network for 3 years. The smell of coffee and nervous sweat mixed with the institutional cologne of officials in damage control mode. At exactly 7 p.m., Vivian Ashworth entered under federal escort. Her designer tennis outfit looked absurd with the ankle monitoring bracelet, and her perfectly styled hair couldn't hide the hollow-eyed defeat of someone watching their empire crumble in real time. Gasps and angry murmurs rippled through the crowd as cameras captured every step of her public humiliation. Marcus approached the podium feeling ice-cold calm. After months of terrorism, federal investigations, and family trauma, this moment felt like destiny rather than confrontation. His voice carried clearly as he began with words that would echo across rural America. 2 years ago, my family woke up to find our bridge blocked by concrete barriers. We thought we were fighting a neighborhood bully. Tonight, you'll learn we were fighting organized crime that reaches into state government, federal agencies, and corporate boardrooms across 6 states. The evidence presentation was surgical and devastating. Massive screens displayed Morrison's money laundering networks while federal prosecutors narrated financial flows that totaled over $60 million in fraud. Audio recordings played Vivian's voice discussing bribery, kidnapping conspiracies, and environmental terrorism in her own words. The first explosion came when prosecutors played footage of Morrison's arrest just hours earlier. FBI agents led him from Prestige Valley headquarters in handcuffs while evidence boxes filled multiple trucks. His corporate empire was being dismantled in real time by federal asset forfeiture teams. But the mic drop moment arrived when Special Agent Martinez stood with a thick folder containing hundreds of arrest warrants. The silence was absolute as he spoke directly to the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we announce the largest rural property rights conspiracy ever prosecuted under federal racketeering statutes. He paused for dramatic effect, then delivered the kill shot. 37 defendants across 6 states, 214 victimized families, $60 million in stolen property, and prison sentences that will ensure these criminals never terrorize another American family. The crowd exploded in sustained applause that lasted over 4 minutes. People were standing, cheering, crying, and embracing as they realized Marcus's victory represented justice for countless families who'd faced identical attacks. The thunderous ovation was cathartic, healing, and absolutely devastating for Vivian's remaining dignity. Vivian's complete destruction reached its peak when prosecutors played recordings of her planning Emma's kidnapping. Her voice describing making the family disappear until they cooperate silenced even her most loyal supporters. 3 HOA board members publicly resigned and apologized on live television. The environmental victory was perfectly timed for maximum impact. EPA Director Thompson announced permanent federal protection for Marcus's heritage apple orchard as critical endangered species habitat. This farmland will remain agricultural forever, protected by the full authority of the United States government and defended by federal law enforcement. Dorothy insisted on addressing the crowd despite her frail health. Rolling her wheelchair to the microphone, her voice shook with emotion as she described missing life-saving dialysis appointments and fearing for her family's survival. This is America. In America, families shouldn't need federal agents to protect them from their neighbors. The corporate collapse was swift and public. Prestige Valley's CEO issued a groveling televised apology, announcing immediate withdrawal from rural development and establishment of a $20 million victim compensation fund. Stock prices had already crashed following the federal indictments. Emma provided the evening's most powerful moment when she grabbed the microphone without permission. "Mrs. Ashworth thought we weren't good enough for her fancy neighborhood, but we're still here, and she's going to federal prison. Good people really do win in America." The legal devastation was comprehensive. Federal prosecutors announced Vivian faced 127 criminal charges with sentences exceeding 40 years. Morrison's RICO charges carried life imprisonment. Asset forfeiture had seized over $200 million in criminal proceeds, with more seizures pending. Marcus's closing words were simple but unforgettable. "We fought this battle for every American family who believes the Constitution still protects ordinary people from extraordinary corruption. Tonight, we proved it does." As federal agents led Vivian away for the final time, cameras captured her, turning back toward Marcus, with pure hatred burning in her eyes. But her power to terrorize was permanently destroyed. She was just another criminal heading to federal prison while the family she'd tried to destroy celebrated, surrounded by hundreds of cheering supporters and millions of viewers nationwide. The sound of justice was beautiful. Thunderous applause, tears of relief, and the collective roar of a community finally free from fear. 3 months later, Marcus stood in his heritage apple orchard, watching sunrise paint the valley gold, while the sweet scent of blooming trees erased every trace of Vivian's chemical terrorism. The silence was perfect. No diesel engines, no construction noise, no federal surveillance, just the natural symphony of birds that had returned since the industrial warfare ended. Vivian Ashworth was serving year 1 of a 32-year federal sentence in a medium security facility 3 states away. Morrison received life without parole under RICO statutes, his corporate empire liquidated to compensate victims across 6 states. 14 government officials had resigned, while 37 defendants faced trials continuing for years. The immediate transformation brought changes Marcus never expected. The Kellerman Agricultural Education Fund, established with Prestige Valley's settlement money, now provided full scholarships for rural students pursuing sustainable farming degrees. Sarah managed the program from their kitchen table, processing applications from teenagers nationwide who'd been inspired by their family's courage. Emma had become a regional celebrity, speaking at Future Farmers of America chapters about constitutional rights and standing up to corporate bullies. Her prize-winning essay about the experience earned a full college scholarship studying organic farming and rural property law. The shy teenager had emerged as a confident young woman who understood her family's place in defending American liberty. Dorothy's health stabilized dramatically once the stress disappeared. Her dialysis appointments proceeded smoothly across the restored bridge, and doctors reported significant cardiovascular improvement. She spent hours teaching Emma heritage seed preservation, ensuring their agricultural traditions would survive another generation, while sharing stories about her husband planting those first apple saplings 60 years ago. The community transformation was remarkable. 3 neighboring properties converted to organic farming, creating a regional cooperative marketing heritage produce to restaurants statewide. The Kellerman Farm became an educational destination, attracting over 3,000 annual visitors, generating tourism revenue supporting the entire valley's economy. Marcus and Sarah renewed wedding vows on the farm's 10th settlement anniversary, surrounded by hundreds of supporters who'd stood with them during the darkest months. The ceremony occurred beneath the same heritage apple trees Vivian had poisoned, now thriving under federal protection as critical endangered species habitat. The legislative impact reached national prominence when Congress passed the Rural Property Protection Act, strengthening landowner rights against HOA overreach and establishing federal penalties for systematic harassment. Marcus's testimony before House Agricultural Committee became legal precedent studied in law schools nationwide, proving ordinary citizens could create extraordinary change. 3 practical lessons emerged from Marcus's victory that rural families should remember. First, document everything with timestamps and photos. Corruption thrives in darkness but dies under documentation. Second, follow the money trail through public records requests. Financial connections often reveal the real power structure behind harassment campaigns. Third, never fight alone. Build coalitions with neighbors, advocacy groups, and media contacts who can amplify your voice when local officials ignore individual complaints. Federal policy changes prevented future Morrison-style conspiracies through mandatory disclosure requirements for HOA board financial relationships and automatic federal review of rural property disputes involving disabled residents. The Department of Justice created specialized rural crime task forces investigating similar cases before they escalated to violence or property theft. Corporate accountability extended beyond Prestige Valley's destruction. New banking laws prohibited construction loans contingent on forced property acquisitions, while state regulations required complete disclosure of development financing relationships with HOA boards. The entire business model enabling systematic rural harassment had been criminalized at federal level. Marcus's memoir Standing Ground: How One Family Defeated Corporate Terrorism became a bestseller, inspiring documentary films and congressional hearings. His agricultural conference speaking engagements helped other families recognize early warning signs of organized harassment and access federal resources for protection. The conservation easement ensuring his property remained agricultural forever proved that principle sometimes pays better than profit. His 15 acres were now worth more as federally protected farmland than luxury development property, while generating sustainable income through educational tourism and organic agriculture. Local economic benefits extended throughout the community. Farm-to-table restaurants partnered with the cooperative for locally sourced ingredients, while the annual Heritage Farm Festival attracted 5,000 visitors, generating hundreds of thousands in regional revenue. Property values increased 15% through agricultural preservation rather than suburban sprawl. On quiet evenings, Marcus walked the restored bridge, listening to water flowing beneath stones his grandfather had placed, remembering when concrete barriers blocked his family's freedom. The smell of evening air carried apple blossoms instead of diesel fumes, cricket songs instead of construction noise, and the peaceful satisfaction of justice finally served. Emma would graduate college and return as sixth-generation Kellerman working this protected land. Dorothy would live to see great-grandchildren playing beneath heritage trees, federal law, now preserved as environmental treasures. Sarah would continue helping rural families fight similar battles through their education fund and legal advocacy network. The victory had transformed them. Marcus understood that defending liberty sometimes requires more courage than most possess, but watching freedom disappear one property at a time wasn't acceptable. They'd proven David defeats Goliath when David has evidence, allies, and constitutional principles worth fighting to preserve. Share your HOA nightmare stories below. Let's expose corrupt boards nationwide. Subscribe for more justice stories where good people win. Next week, how a librarian exposed a $2 million embezzlement and saved her community center.